2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Inside Movies Galore, where we are continuing our holiday season and discussing films that have to do with the holiday season. So, Mo, why don't you tell us what's in store for us on this fine evening?
All right. Tonight we have Trading Places, which is a 1983 American comedy film directed by John Landis. It was written by Timothy Harris and Herschel Wangrod. That's pretty good. I approve. It was produced by Aaron Russo. It stars Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Ralph Bellamy, Don Emesh, Denholm Elliott, Jamie Lee Curtis, and assorted other folks. It's got music by Elmer Bernstein. There you go. It's got cinematography by Robert Painter. It was distributed by Paramount Pictures, and it was released on July 8th of 1983. That's a weird spot to drop a Christmas movie. This is definitely not my first time seeing this, but you know, I guess we'll go around the table here clockwise, and we'll start with you, Forrest. Is this your first time watching Trading Places?
Nope. This is probably this. I can't remember exactly the first time I saw if I was maybe a teenager or my 20s, but it's definitely been on my in regular rotation on my holiday watch list every year. Although I usually tend to watch it after Christmas, but before New Year.
So I gather you're quite fond of it then.
Yeah. Actually, usually what I do is I do watch it in a double feature with Ghostbusters 2, since that's also an Aykroyd comedy set on New Year's.
That's a solid double feature, sir.
Yeah, actually, I'm making a triple feature with Ghostbusters 2 and Terror Train, another New Year's movie with Jamie Lee Curtis. So
nice. Hey, you definitely need more of her after watching this. That's
definitely. Oh, yeah. Watching Jamie Lee in this movie definitely made. I mean, I had already seen True Lies by the time I had seen this. But this kind of like definitely, I was like, holy shit, Jamie Lee Curtis. It's like, holy shit, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Wow, yeah, I saw the TV cut most of the time as a kid, so later on when I finally saw it like on home video, it was like an extra bonus Christmas present under the tree for sure.
or like a king size Halloween treat.
Right.
I can't imagine what you're referring to. This is a purely wholesome film.
It's just solid, heartwarming fun for the whole family.
Plus, you've also got Aykroyd and Murphy both at the top of their game.
Yeah.
Truth. I guess before we continue, we'll give you the very bare bonedest description of it. It's one of those holiday movies where people switch places, or it's one of those movies where people switch places. So rich dude becomes poor dude becomes rich. We'll dig into it as we go on here, but I guess
not the first switcheroo film for what's her name?
Jamie Lee
Curtis,
because she was also in Freaky Friday.
Right. Yep. 20 years later.
There you go.
So this was probably the first, but yeah, definitely not the only one.
She was only switching wigs in this one, though, I think. Anyway, Dave, is this your first time checking out Trading Places? And what
actually, I would have to say, yeah, even though I've seen scenes, like bare minimum of scenes. Like I remember seeing the part where they're on the train later disguised, and I just never I never put two and two together until I actually saw this movie, and I think I saw bits and pieces of the ape scenery.
Right, and then I think that stock floor scene where they make him broke gets covered in some of those compilations of best movie moments of the time or whatever.
I think I remember Eddie Murphy as the homeless man at one point in time too, but I never saw this movie to its full extent and potential that it had. So, and I know Dan Aykroyd as an actor in many films, but I had never paid attention to this film until recently. So, thank you to whoever I guess suggested this.
was
It
me,
was
dude.
definitely a funny movie.
You're welcome.
And I liked it. So
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. It's maybe it's aged like an old shoe in the sun in some respects,
you
but
get to see Dan Aykroyd when he doesn't have the Santa Claus stomach, you know.
that trout looks delicious, though. So, yeah. So, what about you, there, Jake? Is this your first time through Trading Places?
Are you talking about he stuffed the salmon down it?
Yeah.
I kind of concur with Dave that it's one of those ones that I know I've seen parts of it. There are certain scenes that are actually pretty well known. I think when I saw them, I was like, yeah, okay, I've seen that before. Or bits of scenes at least. And I feel like I've probably seen it partly on television, like I've seen portions of it, but I never actually saw the whole thing. And so it's essentially a first time viewing. And for the most part, I thought it was quite good. I've quite enjoyed it. There are a couple of moments that are kind of cringy. There are several scenes that I think maybe would have probably benefited from a bit of nostalgia or a higher, like I've always liked Dan Aykroyd as an actor, but I've never like been over the top fan, and I've always kind of been middling on Eddie Murphy. He has done some phenomenal stuff, but I've also thought some of his stuff is overrated. So it's kind of, I'm in the middle there. But the movie does have an impressive supporting cast, and y'all see I have Mr. Coleman here as my icon. He was just great in that one. But Denholm Elliott, I know him primarily as Marcus Brody from the Indiana Jones movies, so it was nice seeing him get to play a somewhat more competent individual. And overall, yeah, I liked it, and I'm glad I finally saw it. I could see this being one to revisit from time to time.
Indeed. So what about you there, Brandon? Is this your first time, or what did you think of it?
No, not really. I had seen it in the past. I can't remember when. It's probably one of those I saw on HBO or something like that as a teenager. And I never liked this film overall. I think it's because it's always made me feel a mix of certain emotions. Usually I'm either frustrated, angry, depressed, or amused, or a mix of all three whenever I watch this film. And it makes me feel all of those feelings, usually at one point or another. So one could say that's a mark of a good filmmaker to evoke so many emotions. But
Yeah.
if I was to not deal with the first half of the movie, I think I would feel a lot better. But again, that's just me on that. So it was one that I feel is underrated in many ways, but I also consider mixed nuts underrated, and nobody likes mixed nuts. So
No, that's totally fair. I mean, jokes aside, it's not a feel-good holiday movie. It just isn't. It's supposed to kind of show the sliminess of people, I think.
Yeah.
And it's more of a focus on like class discrepancy and the way people above us think of people that are below them, and kind of stuff like that. And I guess that does factor into the holidays in a depressing sense, So it does a lot of things that aren't, making you smile and cozy up with the eggnog with the family. It's not one you'd want to put on for that. I definitely would say that the TV cut, softening up some of the edges of it a bit, makes it a little bit more palatable as just a Christmas movie, because like I said, I grew up seeing it that way primarily for a lot of years. And I just kind of looped it in with the rest of the other switcheroo movies like that, you know, and I tend to enjoy those. I picked it for this though simply because I figured we would be doing a lot of feel good stuff, and it might be nice to get in something a little different in there. I like the movie a lot. Again, I think we've all touched on that. There's parts that we'll cover, you know, very briefly later that are problematic by today's standards, you know. There's some of it that's intentionally unpleasant, and I think that that's rough to take for the unsuspecting viewer maybe going in thinking it's going to be your run-of-the-mill holiday movie. So I guess we'll start laying down the basic plot here, and then I guess the thing to do after that's probably you know, the normal things that we do. So pretty much what's going on is Dan Aykroyd plays this dude Winthrop, who's like the stockbroker guy or whatever. He basically goes out and buys and sells stocks for these two terrible old dudes, the Dukes, Randolph and Mortimer, played by Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici. Pretty, you know, classic slimy rich dudes, I would say. They remind me a lot of the dudes in the Tales from the Dark Side episode, I'll Give You a Million. And they imply that they've done this kind of gimmick that we'll explain here in the past. But basically, you know, Winthrop is like an ace stockbroker for him. He makes him a ton of money. He ends up bumping into Eddie Murphy's character, who's like, you think he's a down on his luck homeless dude, but really he's just kind of a grifter. Like he goes around and pulls little scams on people. We meet him playing a legless Vietnam vet that's also blind, rolling around on a sweet little wheelie board thing. And that's where they first kind of bump into him. He's begging for money out there. Later on, he ends up bumping into Winthrop's character when he's carrying around a briefcase full of their payroll. And he thinks that he's being robbed because, you know, a little casual racism in there. And so he starts accusing Eddie Murphy of like trying to steal the payroll, and he gets into a pretty comical chase with the police in the middle of their little social club. And he ends up getting put in jail. And that's when the Dukes decide that they are going to, you know, make a little wager with each other. They want to see if, because the one guy basically thinks that people that are in Eddie Murphy's position are a product of their environment. The other dude, Mortimer Duke, thinks that it's all in the breeding, it's in the blood or whatever. So basically the gimmick here is they want to take and see if they can put Eddie Murphy into the position that Winthrop is in and see if he'll thrive. And they want to see if they can at the same time simultaneously drive Winthrop, Dan Aykroyd's character, into the position that Eddie Murphy's character was in. So what do you guys think up to this point of the characters of Winthrop and, you know, Eddie Murphy, who plays Billy Ray Valentine, and the Dukes? I guess that's a good way to go into.
I always, I don't know why, but I always picture them as Statler and Waldorf.
They are.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and they're very different personality wise. Like at first, Randolph comes off as a little bit more benevolent, thinking highly of man's capacity for change, and Mortimer comes across as just the greedy, money grubbing, you know. But really, they're both rotten bastards. It's just the one seems nicer.
Yeah, a little bit. And then it's hard to tell if that's because, you know, because his whole thing is he thinks he's going to win the Nobel Prize if he can prove this theory, which I don't think is actually a thing. What about our two main leads there, Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, or Winthrop, Louis Winthrop III, and Billy Ray Valentine? What do you guys think of those dudes?
Billy Ray is the typical Eddie Murphy character that he used to play back in those days, kind of the grifter. I mean, but that's the kind of thing he was. He was always the loudmouth kind of potty mouth character, fast talker. That was just his character that he would play, and he did that very well.
Yeah, he's got some good jokes, man. I love when he the cops pick him up at the beginning and he's still rolling around on his little wheelie board, and they lift him up and he's like, "Oh shit, I can see. I got legs.
I have legs. Thank you. You healed me."
I love when that guy at the bellhop dude at the front of the building like pushes him out into the street, and he's like hanging half off the street and on the sidewalk on that cart, and he's like, "You got soul, I appreciate it." I don't know why that part always cracks me up. What do you guys think of this gimmick here, though? This wager that they're making with each other. It's fairly on the nose, pretty friggin' cruel, because they're the Eddie Murphy part of it, not so much. But the Winthrop part, I mean, they've basically got to intentionally shatter the dude's whole life,
Right. We didn't really talk about Winthrop. We didn't really talk about Winthrop as a character, but he is this super snooty kind of looks down his nose, speaks with an affected accent. Like it just the whole idea of like you get the impression this is someone who it believes, like he drank the Kool-Aid, if you will. Like he believes that with hard work and dedication, maybe one day he'll be like the Dukes. And in the meantime, he's still better than everyone else. And
he was born. I mean, this is something that I used to run into all the time. My father worked at the Homestead in the Greenbrier all the time when I was growing up, 2 like 5-star hotels.
Right.
These people who are born into money, maybe not as high class as the other one, I'm not going to remember their regular names. Just go call them Statler and Waldorf.
The Dukes.
But not born with as much money as them, but still born in high breeding, so to speak. The aristocracy of America, those people who have already been given their leg up, going to the finest schools, always getting in there. So of course they have the thought to expect that all I have to do is work for it, and I will be as successful as these guys. So he has a reason to think that.
Yeah, you can see a lot about his character in that opening sequence where he's like getting shaved and reading the paper, and then he comes outside and like he just stands there and doesn't open the door for himself on the car.
Yeah,
it's like you know right away that he is fully about this life. He's a douchebag. But it's maybe not his fault, like Brandon said, because he was sort of raised into it. And in the process of marrying higher up in the ranks, because he's engaged to the Duke's like grandniece or something like that, who also sucks a lot, like real bad. So basically, they kick off this whole scheme by. The first bit of it's a stretch where they put the money in Winthrop's pocket with like the red X's on it, and they call this board meeting, and then they have them all do this really awkward thing where they touch each other's shoulders and then reach into the person next to him's pocket, and so they've got him for embezzlement, right? And they have him arrested, but at the same time they've also planted angel dust in the pocket of his jacket, so he's already going up on like theft and embezzlement, and then now they're adding drug charges. They keep mistaking it for heroin throughout the movie, which is like they went around and intentionally spread the rumor it was heroin to make it worse.
I like Aykroyd's response to that. He keeps going, no, it was angel dust, and it wasn't mine. It's like you want to lead with that part.
Exactly. What do you guys think of that whole sequence of Winthrop? Go ahead.
I'm not sure it really was a stretch because, when you've got that much money and power, I think they could have ruined anyone at the drop of a hat, and everyone there would have believed it just to keep their position, basically.
Right. I mean, my whole point is that the whole hand on the shoulder, digging in the neighbor's pocket, that part of it was obviously, it seemed for comedic effect,
Yeah, it could be.
I think it was supposed to be like a commentary on how people will do whatever those rich farts tell them to do, because that's where the money comes from,
It's actually, though, it's also speaks to modern times. Depending on who's doing the accusing, all it takes is an accusal to get the world to feel that you are guilty.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether you really are or not, and you see that today a lot. That's but it's not necessarily the wealthy doing it this time. It's pretty much just anybody on a keyboard. It's cancel culture. these days.
Pretty
That's
much.
what takes
And you
place.
see that reflected in this with his friends and his fiance, because they
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know one way or the other if he's guilty or not. But the embarrassment of it is like, that's totally not cool. And so they pretty
Right.
much disown him. So that works out on its own.
And because of their breeding, they'll believe anything that the next person tells them. So,
Yeah. And
As long as it looks good,
It's reputation. I mean, those people, they are all about looks and reputation. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not, it's whether it's perceived to be true, because that would destroy them. I mean, it's all about rep.
Right.
And
You don't want to.
incidentally, I guess it's worth noting that his fiance is played by Kristen Holby, who only has 2 acting credits, but is apparently a very well-known model at the time. So that seems appropriate for that particular character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was cute,
Yes, she was.
So pretty much, they send him down to the clink. He gets roughed up. He ends up coming out in what looks to be like, I don't know, man. He's got that neon green like fishnet shirt under that Yankee leather coat. It's like something a generic enemy in a Streets of Rage game would wear or something like that. It's hilarious. And then, they're coming out and he's just about got his fiance convinced that he's being framed. And the one dude, I forget his name, the guy that they have working as like their fixer or whatever. Beaks, played by Paul Gleason.
Yeah.
That guy pays Jamie Lee's character, and this is where we get her introduction. She's like a prostitute, and he pays her to go over and like just start planting kisses on Winthrop and asking him for a fix or whatever. She thinks she's just doing this as a joke that will like turn him on or whatever. So she's like, all right, why not? I think she said he paid her $100. So worth it. But this pretty much shatters his explanation with his fiance. So he's truly down and out at this point. He tries to get a cab ride from her and she fronts him the money for the cab. And it turns out that he can't get into his house. Coleman, who is pretty much probably pretty fed up with him to a certain point, maybe not life ruining levels of fed up, but fed up enough to slam the door on his ass. Just doesn't let him in the house. They try going to the bank, and it turns out that all his cards are seized and all this stuff. So he's dead broke. And Jamie Lee's character, I believe her name was Ophelia. Yeah. She goes ahead and takes some mercy on him, and he kind of ends up taken in by the poor in a sense, even though she's got a good nest egg of like 40 grand saved aside. That comes up later. But meanwhile, while all this, first off, what do you guys think of Jamie Lee's intro and that whole dynamic there of like Eddie being taken in by the rich and him being taken in by the people he was looking down on, kind of?
Yeah, I thought that whole part was depressing for me, so I had a hard time with it.
Yeah. The whole part with him getting cast down and
I just it frustrated me, but I think it's more just looking at this from a 2020 lens, maybe. Even though I felt like that before, I've more than felt like that now. I think to myself, that could happen to anybody. That could happen to me. That could happen to any of you. It could happen to any of us. Or we could be made homeless or whatnot just because the wrong higher up tells us there. So.
It is rough. Right. You feel for him by that point where he's on his knees, like begging her to just believe him. And she's like, just
but you do, but Dan Aykroyd's character, at least in this very beginning, he's almost just as like cocky and slimeballish as the rich people that make a bet on him for. So when I look at it from the perspective that he's just another slimeball, maybe I think he needs to be taken down a notch.
They certainly succeeded in that,
it took him down a couple notches. And Curtis's character, she comes off at first like just the basic hustler, kind of character, but you quickly see that she's definitely got some goodness to her. And if she didn't, She could have easily just said, "Okay, dude, I'm done with you," and then Brandon, you would have had a much darker movie to.
Oh, I mean, and it wouldn't have bothered me if they did go that way. If they had taken her character out entirely and had his character crash and burn, or maybe even die at the end, and have Eddie Murphy be the one to stumble upon it.
Right. And as far as Murphy on the flip side of that, I kind of like that whole where like they have to convince him hard that it's not a put on, that they're not,
it's classic. I mean,
go
ahead.
No, I was gonna say, don't con a con artist.
Yeah,
it's just so great. I mean, they bring him in there, they clean him up. They're explaining that all this stuff is yours now, and he's like slowly, stealing things as they're explaining it. And they're like, "You're only stealing from yourself, man." And he's like, "What about this bass?" And he's doing some Harlem Globetrotter shit, and then he breaks it. That's a good sort of window into their mentality too, is they immediately realize like, yeah, we pay, it's worth like 30 grand, but we estimated it at 50 grand to the insurance, so you already made us 15 grand. I love that part where he's like, shit, you want me to break something else? Like, no,
he did that laugh at the end the Muppets are doing. Whoa!
Right.
Funny enough, speaking of Muppets, Frank Oz has a cameo as a police officer in this movie.
Oh, there's
we did skip over that. That's a great one because he immediately knows it's PCP just by tasting a little bit of it. I'm pretty sure that's not supposed to be how cops do that.
All right, but there's so many cameos, and we've skipped a couple of them. Our old friend Walt Gorney, who played Crazy Ralph in the Friday the 13th, he's in there, and you got Nicholas Guest, who plays the yuppie asshole neighbor in Christmas Vacation. He's one of Winthrop's yuppie friends, if I remember correctly, and
Al Franken.
Al Franken's in there. We haven't gotten to him yet, but he's in there. Giancarlo Esposito was in the jail cell with him. You got Bill Cobb shows up as a bartender, and Bo Diddley as a pawnbroker. You got a lot of folks that show up in this. It's fun.
Yeah, it was fleshed out, man. All the supporting cast. It was well put together movie where that was concerned. But basically he kind of has to, be convinced that these dudes aren't just trying to like use him as some weird love slave or something. I think he thinks that's what's going on at first, and
they thought Coleman was lonely and needed.
You never know, man. I mean, I imagine that it wouldn't have been the first time some rich white dudes tried to lure him into a car. He just, something seemed different about it this time because he knew to ask questions like, "What the hell is this?" But basically, he kind of takes to it pretty good. We get the initial scene where he's kind of flaunting it around, and it's so perfect because in the jail cell he's talking all this shit about how he's like a pimp with all these bitches or whatever, and a limousine and all this shit. And the dudes are about to kick his ass when he makes bail because the Dukes bailed him out for this bet. Yeah. And then later, after he's taken to the idea that these dudes are serious, like this is all mine. He goes to a bar that he used to frequent and starts paying the dude all this money that he owed him and some hits, buys champagne for everyone in there. And the two thugs that he was in the jail cell with that were going to kick his ass, question him about the limo, and he's actually got it. And, he's all decked out in these fine clothes with just money to burn. And he invites them all back to the house for a house party. This is one of my favorite sequences in the whole movie because he's just not having fun with it at all. And I think that that's a good example of how I think if you did come from nothing to something, you might appreciate it more a little bit. Right. Because he's immediately like, man, who's putting out these cools on the floor? Like, I just love his face right there when he's holding that cigarette butt and he's yelling about it, man. And he pretty much kicks them all out. And there's that beautiful scene with Coleman where he's like, those aren't my friends, man. They're just a bunch of freeloaders taking advantage. And he actually says goodnight to Coleman. He just says, he thanks him for like his service, basically. And that warms his old little heart there because it wasn't something that he was getting from Winthrop.
Yeah, I love that scene. Like the reaction that Denholm Elliott has there. You can tell that was something he was not expecting, and it just made his day.
Yeah, it's almost like it almost choked me up a little bit. So what do you guys think of Eddie Murphy's evolution from, because he does go from like a loudmouth sort of con artist dude to actually he's got a knack for the pork belly market.
A well-paid loudmouth con artist.
Pretty much. I mean, it turns out, I love that scene too where they're explaining the stockbroker shit to him, and he's like, "Oh, so you guys are basically bookies." He immediately knows, and that guy's like, it's kind of a little casually racist, but he's like, I knew he'd know what we were talking about, because he's supposed to be a criminal or something, and which is just messed up, because at this point, all we've seen him do is beg on the street and be mistaken as a mugger, right. So there's no indication ever that he actually is a criminal. They just assume that because he's African American and down on his luck, because they're rotten old racist bastards,
They say like, "Are you from a broken home?" And then Eddie Murphy's like, "Yes, so what?" Yeah, it's like, it's an interesting. I like the idea that when he's doing that, it kind of leads you to see that. Given even the short amount of time, how he starts to mimic some of the behaviors that some of those wealthy people do at the time, such as saying,
but kind of the good stuff, Well, but then there's also, he's a little more respectful. Like, he kind of picks up the good parts of it, but doesn't become a scumbag,
Right.
And they try to lead him into different little like there's that one part later where Mortimer tries to drop his money clip or something, like he'd steal it, and Eddie brings it back to him, and you could tell later on when he's like actually being pretty successful with it that he's like kind of proud of himself, as he should be, because he even kind of learned that he could make something of himself with the right opportunities, and I guess this all leads us towards our eventual finale there. But, back over to Dan Aykroyd's side of things here. He is pretty much, working with Ophelia, because she's got this 40 grand that she's like going to let him use to get back on his feet. But he's got to figure out how he's going to do this here. So he tries to go to the country club to get a loan from like his circle of friends, which is a great part where they're singing that like, what's it? The barbershop quartet shit to those girls, but it's like a song about how they're all sluts.
Yeah.
His outfit there is pretty on point too. It's some crazy polyester shit going on, and another really ratty fur coat. But they pretty much shoot him down. That's where they tell him straight up, kind of that like, we don't even want to be associated with you, dude. Just get out of here. No one wants to buy your drugs here. And so he's pretty much screwed. Like, he doesn't know how to get any more money to be able to invest this shit in the stock markets, and because 40 grand is a lot, but not enough to really make some moves with there. And so he obviously is like stuck. There's nothing that he can do. Meanwhile, through all this, him and Jamie Lee have kind of became closer. She's nurturing him back to health when he's got like that sickness or whatever. And just being good, supportive to him. They're kind of almost building a nice, happy little life there together, but he's got this nagging on him. And when he sees that Valentine is being super successful, like he sees it in the paper, he just snaps completely. And that's when we get the good trash bag Santa appearance, which is just absolutely my favorite sequence of the entire movie. Where the hell did he get the Santa suit?
Right?
Is there like a deleted scene where he digs that out of a septic tank or something? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe he found it in a trash bin or something. Like
had to have, man, because that wasn't just dirty. It was like weathered and aged. It looks like it had quite.
Maybe he found Billy Bob Thornton's Santa passed out drunk and took his clothes or something.
It had to have been, because that thing was foul. It looked like it had a scent that carried for a few hundred yards, And his whole intent here, I guess, is to sneak with this dirty ass Santa suit into this Christmas party they're holding, like yearly Christmas event, but also partially to celebrate all this success that's came with Valentine working for him. And the cool part about that's we see Eddie Murphy's character like still diligently working through the Christmas party, you know. So he's kind of become Winthrop at this point of the movie in a lot of ways. You know, he's super dedicated to the job and, you know, kind of trying to actually make the most of this opportunity, even though I think by this point he's kind of starting to pick up on the fact that there might be some type of wager going on here, something like that, because he's ran into Dan Aykroyd a couple of times, or at least like seen him out and about, and he's all disheveled and messed up, and Eddie's like in the position that he was in, so he's like, oh, this is a little strange. And Winthrop doesn't know this is a bet at all, so he's like ready to come in there and plant drugs in his office, or apparently possibly even murder him, you know, because he's purchased a pistol at the pawn shop, and you know, he just brandishes it like a psycho. I love it when he jumps up on the table. Every part of that whole scene is just, it's like absolutely to the maximum the part where Clark snaps in A Christmas Story, only, or in A Christmas Vacation, but like next level, like he brought a gun to work. Fucking and I don't know, what do you guys think about that whole scene there?
The scene in the office, or the one afterwards where he disrupts the party, or
just the lead up to the office at this point, and him and Eddie having their confrontation. I guess that's the first half of the whole sequence.
All right, so yeah, well, the lead up to the office was him stuffing that soup with all of it.
Steals half a fucking buffet right there.
That was pretty.
He put a lobster down his pants.
I think it was like a whole slab of salmon or something. If I'm, it's like, oh, if it didn't smell before, it's going to.
See, I thought he was taking that stuff to put it in the desk the first time that I ever watched it. You know, 'cause it's like, okay, he's going into the office. He's going to make his. I was a kid, you know, so it's like he's going to make his desk stink like fish and shrimp or something, you know. But he was just really out of his gourd at that point. I feel like we lost some time there. Maybe he went on like a crack bender for a few days, and just as that's how the suit got weathered. I don't know.
Not crack, angel dust.
Yeah, important to clarify.
But yeah, so he does go in and tries to plant drugs in the desk, and it's like, yeah, that's going to work.
Well, and I love how Eddie kind of handles the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't get hostile or anything, or like get all accusatory right away. He just kind of comes in. He's like, yo, man, what are you doing? You know, this guy's clearly insane. I'm going to have to call security. Like, I think he handles it with a lot more dignity than Winthrop handled his confrontation with Eddie at the beginning of the movie.
Well, yeah.
You know? And that kind of shows where the differences, I think, maybe from their backgrounds affect how they treat people in desperate situations. You know what I mean?
Right.
What do you guys think of that stash of drugs? Impressive, right? That's why I'm thinking that we lost some time here, because he had to go procure those, and he was in a pretty desperate state.
Yeah.
He managed to find those real quick. I have to admit, if he wasn't a dealer, he seems to be as resourceful as one.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I imagine Jamie Lee had some hand there in helping him score the junk or whatever because he's got Quaaludes, he's got cocaine, he's got marijuana, friggin'. I think some angel dust had to have been in there since he'd already had previous experience with that.
Right.
So basically, you know, this turns pretty insane pretty quick. Like security and the Dukes show up in there. He whips out a gun. He's just brandishing it all over the place. He kind of runs out the joint and scares the shit out of all the guests. And then we get that scene where the Winthrop or the gut. What's that?
He grabs a piece of meat from the banquet or whatever.
I love when he accidentally pulls that out on him too. When he first pulls out the gun, it's actually that piece of roast beef. So damn classic. That's the first thing Eddie throws away when he's cleaning up too, and he picks it up and he looks at it like roast beef. Right. I don't know, man. I love that strut that he does out too after he hops up on that table and points the gun at all of them. Like in a sinister way, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, you guys you guys used to like kiss my ass before and bow down to me before when I was one of you, but now at least I could scare you into doing the same kind of thing, and I'm still king shit, at least for a minute, you know? And then he just immediately starts pounding Jack Daniels and getting greasy with it. But before we get to all that, we get that scene where the Dukes are talking to Valentine and trying to basically explain it away as he used to work for him. He got into drugs, yada, yada. And there's that whole exchange where Eddie Murphy tells him like, well, you know, they're talking about how he's like unemployed and on drugs or whatever. And he's like, that's no excuse. You know, if he's unemployed, like, how can he buy drugs? He could be doing something better than that. And he says that line about like, you can't be too easy on people like that, you know? Take it from me, I know, kind of thing. Like, if they really wanted to do something better, they probably could. And it seems like he learns a bit of the lesson that they were trying to teach to each other, but not a scumbag way. Because pretty much his immediate next course of action is to go try to find Winthorpe, because he realizes that, you know, something's amiss here. This is clearly like some wager that they've placed between each other, because they just give it away, you know.
Well, I mean, wasn't it right after this where he actually does hear them in the bathroom discussing the wager?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They basically.
Yeah. So he basically hears it. Yeah. That's the worst part of it all. It's like it wasn't even an amount that normal people would consider a worthy wager. It was an amount that that Eddie Murphy, someone at his socioeconomic level, would probably consider an insult. You know, it's like,
it's some sinister shit. I mean, you could be forgiven thinking it was for some large sum of money the first time watching this, but no, it's just for $1. It's just for the point of seeing if they can do it, you know, because they're bored, rich old pieces of shit. We missed an important lead up to this, though, and that's when Eddie's talking to him about not being too hard or too easy on those people because he's got experience. He like pockets the joint while he's throwing away the other drugs. And then he's smoking that in the bathroom or attempting to when they walk in.
And when they walk in, he pops it into his mouth.
Yeah, it's so great. I like how. Well, go ahead. I like how he's like blowing it into the vent too, like it's gonna just make the whole Christmas party reek of weed.
Right.
Well, and then
in fairness, after Aykroyd's appearance, it would be difficult to smell anything over that, probably.
Oh shit, yeah. I mean, and if you could smell weed over it, it'd be a pleasant exchange, you know, instead of that shit. But that scene's important too, because you know, like you pointed out, you kind of think of the older brother or whatever, Randolph, as being like still kind of a nice guy in his own rich scumbag kind of way. But that scene in the bathroom dispels all of that. There's no more. No part of you wants to see these guys get anything but wrecked. And then that's when Eddie Murphy heads out to find Winthrop. He's clearly desperate and going to do something stupid, and he does almost blow his brains out. That's after the salmon on the bus, though. I don't know. What do you guys think of that whole sequence leading up to the attempted suicide there?
I mean, I really don't think that he should have gone like down that route right away. I mean, I guess when it comes down to a man who's lost everything and trying to get everything back, you know, you kind of think that he will go the suicide route, but that was a little bit more darker than I think that they needed to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean he still has Jamie Lee back at the slum house, you know. I mean, they could build a great life with that $40,000 investing it properly, like she already seemed to be. He could get a friggin' job. You know, there's other options than just blowing out your brains at a bus stop. What do you guys think though about let's just get it out the way. Did that fucking beard salmon not look delicious? Okay. I think we can all agree on that. And as drunk as he was, you know, taking down that pounder of Jack Daniels beforehand, it was probably the best thing he'd eaten all year, you know. like in his
Right.
mind at the time, anyways. Because it's like when you eat like a really bad frozen dinner or something when you're wasted, it just tastes so good. I imagine that beard salmon was choice.
Well, I'm sure the salmon was good quality when he got it.
Right.
Yeah, and who knows, whatever funk that beard was carrying might have added a little something to it to make it, because rich people always be eating like funky cheese and shit that they shouldn't put in their mouths anyways.
Or spice make everything nice. And also, it could be maybe with enough booze in his system, maybe that would have offset some of the little microbes a little.
Oh yeah, that Jack will kill it.
In the aftermath of this scene, I kind of follow along with Dan Aykroyd's character because I feel worse and more depressed and angry as the movie goes on, and it's after that point that I finally start finding the movie more amusing and enjoyable. So in a way, I kind of follow right along with how he's doing, which is kind of cool.
They could have brought this point in like this should have been like the midway point of the movie, not 2/3 of the way through it. I think they did drive home the depressing elements of it and the unpleasant elements of it enough. And then he almost killed. We left out the part about how he pulls the trigger fully, like is committed to killing himself, but it doesn't go off, and he's like, "Damn it!" I'm sure in his brain he's thinking like, "I bought a defective gun," and then he throws it and it goes off.
Right.
He was that close, and it seemed like a cruel twist of fate. Like nothing could go right for him, including killing himself.
Actually, my first reaction when he pulled the trigger and it didn't go off, I'm like, I'll bet the dude at the pawn shop looked at him funny when he got the gun.
Yeah,
I was like, I bet the dude didn't even sell many bullets. It was like,
and he's so clueless he wouldn't think to buy them.
Yeah. And then he threw it away and it went off, and I was like, oh, I guess he did. Yeah.
I could have died.
He very nearly did. Yeah. You'd think he might. I mean, I don't know. That might have been a turning point for me. I couldn't say unless I was put in the position, but I might have seen it as that at first. Like, damn, I can't even kill myself right. But then, I don't know. It'd be hard to come home to Jamie Lee and not perk up a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But this is where, friggin' Valentine finally comes and meets up with him or tries to, but he's like jacked up clearly with some alcohol poisoning. So they take him back to the house and nurse him back to health. And that's this scene in the movie, I feel like should have been left out, where he thinks it's all a dream for a minute and kind of reverts back to his cocky asshole, like classist self for a minute right there. And then as we all know, he wakes up and fully and sees Eddie Murphy and Jamie Lee there, and he jumps up and starts choking Eddie Murphy. Am I wrong in thinking that that's just kind of unfortunate character development wise? You'd think that he would have been having like a Scrooge moment, maybe, where he woke up and he's like different, kind of. I don't know.
Right.
I feel like it was in keeping with his character.
I
It's
suppose.
unfortunate, but yeah.
What's that, Brennan?
They did it all in one night.
Well, I think it's at by this point in the movie, even though I've seen it, it's like you're itching for a little bit of feel good stuff, which I guess we do get. They immediately do pal down and they're like, we're going to get these dudes. I especially love that they're like cleaning all his skeet shooting guns. And Eddie Murphy's like, you can't just shoot someone in the kneecaps with a double barrel 12 gauge because they ripped you off, man. You get 20 to life for that shit. And Dan Aykroyd's just like, why not? And then, Coleman is the one who finally, like, I think is the tiebreaker on that, because he's kind of got a point, and Eddie Murphy comes up with the brilliance of the best way to hurt rich people is to make them poor people.
Oh, yeah.
So in enters this whole like element of this crop report that's coming out on this frozen orange juice. Because this whole time there's been like a subplot of the movie where the Dukes are trying to corner the market on this frozen orange
And
juice.
it's got this like a sneaky, slummy looking detective that's apparently been was the person who planted the drugs to begin with.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the basic subplot, you know. And so they get this skiff on his goods that he has, and they go with it.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much. Like he's going to steal this crop report and deliver it to them early so they can know how to buy or sell these stocks before anyone else does.
And I like that stock exchange scene too, you know. But we'll get to it.
It's definitely gnarly. I still don't fully understand how stock exchange works.
Right.
It boggles my mind. It seems like something that shouldn't.
They actually have a nice stock futures trading for dummies explanation on the IMDb page where they kind of, but even so, it's like, and I know enough about it to kind of follow it, but
I used to play a 1970s-ish game called Stocks and Bonds, and it taught you all about like the bull and the bear market.
I mean, I know enough about economics and trading and whatever to know the basics. It's just, but following that scene is difficult because they use all the shorthand. There's all the yelling and all that kind of stuff.
Right. That's the element
tricky.
of it I don't understand. Like, I get the basics of how stock works, but like how the whole mechanics of that stock floor trading shit just seems like something that shouldn't be possible.
Right.
But, you know, basically they recognize that they're using this dude as their fixer because Jamie Lee recognizes them on the news report about this crop report that they're watching as they're cleaning the guns. And so they hatch this plan to intercept the shit because at this point they don't know that Eddie's on to their wager here. So he like taps the phones and records, you know, where they're going to be making this exchange at. And that's where we get one of the most simultaneously hilarious and cringy sequences of the movie. And that's with them coming onto the train in various disguises to make the switch of these briefcases while Beeks, their fixer dude, is none the wiser.
I love the whole gorilla thing that they do in that scene. They also set that up with the gorilla like there that they're transporting and the other guy in the costume. It just I don't know. He's been doing nothing but causing pain for Dan Aykroyd's character for most of the movie. When you were talking about like he should just go and get a job, I think that they were going to sabotage it because they wanted him to be unable to work, unable to do anything, and somehow make everything from nothing. And that's that concept of, and it's an economic concept that is in the real world of the idea of you should be able to be a millionaire with zero opportunities to make money.
Yeah.
And if you can't work extremely hard for no money and become a millionaire, you're not working hard enough.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. You're probably right. At least during the duration of this wager, they would have shut down anything that he was trying to do like normally. But you know, they go about like infiltrating his train car pretty bumblingly. Eddie's got it down with his exchange student gimmick and the beef jerky. Absolutely love that.
Yeah,
what was
it he was doing? He was like doing some weird chants or whatever, and then suddenly he's like, beef jerky.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's never a bad time for beef jerky.
And then I think the next one that comes in is Coleman. And he's like an Irish priest or something with a flagon of whiskey. That was pretty fun. And then Jamie Lee comes in as a Swedish something or a Swiss. And then the cringy part.
See,
blackface. But
I just don't know why that was necessary. I mean, they already had 3 people in costumes in there. I feel like the switch could have happened. It's just they wanted them all in costumes, and would be interesting to know like what the thought process behind that, even at the time, was. You know,
one thing that is worth noting, you mentioned briefly the guy in the gorilla outfit, which of course is our friend Jim Belushi, I believe. Is there actually is a raging costume party going on the train as this is happening, So it actually gives them a good excuse to be going around in these weird outfits. So
it does, yeah. And then, I mean, obviously, I guess they just stuck in character, which doesn't make sense because he didn't know any of them other than Winthrop.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So to even bring him into the car,
he would have probably recognized Ophelia because he's the one that paid her.
he paid her to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those two, that's questionable. I don't know why. I mean, really, they could have done the switch with just two of them too.
Yeah.
But again, I think the logic was probably costume party. Let's use this as an excuse to get all of our leads into costumes and play characters.
Right.
Yeah.
The Dan Aykroyd blackface, I mean, could maybe been excused to an extent if his Rasta impression was even funny or good, but it's just not. And he's smoking a cigar instead of weed. It would have been nice if he just committed. It also would have been pretty funny if they were just all blazed for the gorilla scene and just kind of looking in awe at what was about to happen. But pretty much, he figures it out because he recognizes Winthrop, and he does actually recognize Ophelia because he says something to her, I think, to that effect, as he's like got him at gunpoint, leading him out of there. And they end up back there. Gorilla saves the day by conking him on the head, and they have successfully retrieved this report. And they have several briefcases that are identical, so they meet the Dukes in a parking garage to make this exchange. And what they do is they give them like a fake version of the report. They take the money, so now they've got that extra bit of that chunk of change that they really needed to properly play the stock market. And so the whole like final bit of the movie basically is them going in there and snaking those dudes for all that sweet orange juice money. And that's where we arrive at the whole stock exchange part that we alluded to earlier. And it's nuts, man. And from what I've seen of other movies that portray that whole, down in the what do they call it? The bullpen or the pit?
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems to be how they portray it in every movie. So, I mean, is that an accurate portrayal of the stock market? Or?
Not anymore.
I imagine.
At the time it was made, it would be accurate, but now a lot of it's done online.
Yeah.
Right. And I would think even if there is a physical place where they still gather like that, it'd all be digitized, so it'd be almost silent, I
mean, it's still there, but it's basically for show. It's basically for show on television.
Right. Right.
Well, you wouldn't have much in there today anyway because of the thing going on. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so basically, what's up?
No, go ahead, sir.
Well, I was going to say, just basically, I'll try and summarize the scheme in a nutshell, and we can see basically, like you said, the Statler and Waldorf are trying to corner the market on the OJ. So they feed them a bogus report that says that there was a bad crop and that the prices are going to skyrocket, basically. And so they go in there trying to goose it along and encourage everyone to pay up and up and up. And these guys go in whole hog for this really high price. And then the two start undercutting and going down, down, down because they know it's actually going to be a low price. And then, of course, the news report actually comes out that says, yeah, orange juice is going to be cheap this year.
Yeah, it goes from like 150 down to 29 or something like that.
Like 29 cents a share or something like that. Yeah, or so it's like 29. Yeah.
And that's how they use her nest egg.
Yeah.
Did we say that, by the way? That's how her nest egg was used.
And Coleman chipped in a lot too.
Yeah, Coleman chipped in his life savings. Yeah, so because that was kind of their deal. If you remember back, like they had the 40 grand that Jamie Lee had, but he needed like a little bit more, so they could go in there like loaded for bear, basically. And that's why he tried to get the loan off of those yuppies at the racquetball club or whatever. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, incidentally, that's another thing that you don't really think about, or I didn't think about until just now. But it's another indication of what tight-fisted assholes these rich people are. If Coleman's life savings are only a little bit more than what Ophelia had.
Well, I mean, You remember when they were like the servant at the beginning of the movie was like,
Okay.
yeah, I'm going to give you a Christmas bonus.
Oh, yeah.
$5.
I might just go to the movies alone. I love how that dude makes a point to tell him like half of that's from me. That's amazing. Just rotten bastard. So you don't feel bad at all in the culmination of the scene when we find out that they have lost like $350 million because of this. You know, they absolutely bankrupted the dude. The higher ups come out immediately, kick him off the board of the stock exchange. They seize all their assets, you know, because they've got to pay back anything they've lost and they don't have the money to cover it. So they're destitute. Like the one dude has a heart attack immediately. And the other guy's just like, fuck him, get those people back in here and let's just fire those machines back up and fix this, you know? But that's not the way it works. And it's just glorious. It's no wonder that gets cited as like a classic scene of 80s movies or whatever. Because it's satisfying watching those old pieces of crap like go nose to the dirt, you know?
Yeah.
And I especially love how Eddie Murphy jumps into Dan Aykroyd's arms when they're celebrating right there. It's just adorable. So I don't know. You guys got
cover art.
Indeed. And they've came out of this rich. I don't know if we get an exact number put on it of how much they have made. I'm assuming pretty close to that 350 mil, or at least a sizable chunk of it, because they've got like seemingly their own private island at the end of the thing. That's the way I've always took the finale, is that they bought a friggin' island and they're out there just chilling with Jamie in a bikini and sipping mimosas or whatever. What's his name? Coleman's no longer a butler. He's another one of the rich dudes. So, you know, they're just living the life. It's probably the biggest feel good moment in the movie for sure. So I don't know. What do you guys have any thoughts on the final sequence there? Those guys getting destitute, their reaction to it, anything? How'd you take that scene?
Probably best. Probably one of my. The most satisfying in the film.
Probably one of the more highlights of the film. Because you get their reaction, and it's like they finally get out of their box seat. Because it's almost like they were in an opera house, you know, and they got down onto the ground floor and they were desperate to get their money back, you know, and they knew that they were probably losing out.
Oh yeah, dude, they were freaking the fuck out. Like they snatched those receipts from that dude and they were fixing to jump right in there, but it ended. You know, they were too old to get down there quick enough, I guess. Life of leisure. I'll do that to you sometimes. And I don't know, man. I just think that it's cool that they cut like Waldorf. Damn it, I think it's cool that they cut Coleman in on it. You know, they didn't have to do that. It's like they became a little band of friends, you know, and all did this together, because really at the end of the day too, like, if it wasn't for another sort of poor person or a lower class person in Ophelia, he wouldn't have the money to start with and even think about doing any of this anyways. You know, I think that's my favorite element of the movie, is how, you know, you kind of start out with this snooty rich dude in this place where he's looking down on certain types of people. And then it turns out that those certain types of people are the people that end up helping him take down the people that are above him, you know. At the same point, he was going to just go skeet shoot their ass. He wasn't even going to do this stock market scheme. It was kind of Eddie Murphy and Ophelia that came up with it, you know. He just had the brains to put it into action. So
well, and it's also a nice little kind of thumbing of the nose to the Duke brothers, because it's like they wanted to prove that they could make anyone turn to crime. And in a sense, they got their wish, because in a sense, they kind of were the victims of insider trading. But, you know, who are they going to report them to? Because that's what they were trying to do.
Exactly.
It's like, so they were hoisted by their own petard, as it were.
You sound like you were going to say something there, Brandon. What was that?
One of the things this movie reminded me of was one that came later, a Mel Brooks movie called Life Stinks. And Life Stinks was kind of like a combination between this and Sullivan's Travels. And it wasn't all that great. It wasn't one of his better ones, but it did remind me of that in a lot of ways. And there was an element very similar to this about some people trying to basically take advantage.
It's always fun to see those people get their comeuppance too. I mean, in a way, it almost does. This could just be me associating too much with Tales from the Dark Side, because those guys remind me a lot of that episode. I'll give you a million. Almost identical. Two old dudes that are like billionaires making crazy wagers, except it's over their soul in that episode. But the way it all kind of does come around with like that comical comeuppance at the end, and they have the whole bit where they're like, oh, we made a wager where we wanted to see if we could make a bunch of like stupid money at the stock market while bankrupting you two assholes at the same time. And then they, Dan Aykroyd's the one who didn't think they could do it or whatever, so he has to pay Eddie Murphy the $1. Like, that's such a good middle finger to those guys at the very end. I think that's when the guy starts having the heart attack, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. That was
what about you, Forrest? We haven't got much from you on this, boy. What do you think, man?
On their revenge on the Dukes.
Oh yeah, pretty much just the whole finale of this here, right up to their island getaway.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta agree that. Well, first of all, on the train with Dan Aykroyd, that part I definitely don't think has aged very well. I did like seeing Jamie Lee Curtis in her little Swedish outfit, outfit. But Paul Gleason, they put Paul Gleason in gorilla suit. That was great. And just and I kind of like how, I guess, how compared to like other John Landis movies at the time, it was, the finale wasn't, it was a lot more, oh god, I feel like it was a lot more subdued compared to, say, the Blues Brothers or Animal House.
Yeah, I feel like maybe he was trying to say a little bit more with this movie. So that kind of factors into that. I mean, it's obviously not just the wacky, fun hijinks with some stuff that people might consider politically incorrect nowadays.
Yeah, it's like this whole big, it's like other John Landis movies at the time. It's like they usually have a finale with a lot of chaos and destruction.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, if anything, they did the opposite in this, because Eddie Murphy tells them to get the fuck out when they're trying to party, A
lot more wit. It's a lot more wit. It's a lot more wit this time. A lot more wit, and this time around.
Of course, Animal House did also have a strong stick it to the man mentality to it.
There was definitely that was definitely a strong. There was definitely a strong stick it to the man, and same with the Blues Brothers. There was definitely with Landis's work up to that point, there was a strong stick it to the man streak to it up until Twilight Zone, when it's like, oh yeah, John Landis is the man.
Yeah.
I think that's probably too product of his generation, Like, I think there was a lot of that in a lot of the movies from people of his age range, possibly. I don't know. I guess we could move into like favorite characters and all that jazz to close this out now.
Yeah.
I guess we'll start with you up there, Dave. Do you got a favorite character, favorite scene in the movie?
I guess my favorite scene in the movie is the I would have to say the part with the ape. Especially in the end when they got to the cage coming down on the ship, and they're like, there was only supposed to be one ape, wasn't there?
Yeah.
That's great. Beaker got shipped to Africa. We totally did leave that out.
And it is also worth mentioning that the baggage handlers there, we got Tom Davis, and we have a pre-politics, pre-scandal Al Franken,
yep.
from much younger at the time.
Yes.
I almost didn't recognize him.
Yeah.
What about favorite character there, Dave?
Favorite character, I would have to say would probably be Dan Aykroyd or
Lewis Winthrop III.
no, because he threw out the N word. I cannot stand people who are that. Although Don
Did Dan
Amici,
Aykroyd ever say that? Oh, you're talking about the Dukes.
Yeah, the Dukes. Yeah.
I feel like that was, since we touched on it, those guys were straight up racist. I feel like Winthrop was classist, So there was a different flavor to it because they like immediately broke down after that. So I don't think that he was really that way. He was just, he came across with it in that comment when he was waking up from his Scrooge dream because of the class element to it. I think, that's how I took it anyways. But yeah, I don't know. Who would your favorite character be then? If it's not you're going with Dan Aykroyd?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dan Aykroyd because even though he's kind of a stiff comedian, I tend to go with his character. Eddie Murphy kind of screams too much sometimes. So
he was definitely guilty of that at the beginning of the movie. His character evolution throughout it is one of my favorite parts of the movie, though. I think he does become very much closer to relating to Winthrop by the end, so that's fun. What about you, Jake? You got a favorite character, favorite scene?
Well, I gotta say, as Eddie Murphy roles go, Billy Ray Valentine is probably one of my favorite characters he's played. And I think he did a fine job in it. But I'm going to definitely say overall my favorite character has got to be Coleman. He was a fun dude. I like Billy Ray. I liked Ophelia. There were, a few likable ones in the movie, but definitely Coleman's a favorite. And as far as favorite moments or whatever, I'm trying to remember if there was a particular line that leapt out at me in this one. There were a lot of good ones. It's hard to think of like what's the very best one. But it's probably
would be when Beaker told those baggage handlers, he was like, "I'll rip out your eyeballs and piss in your brain."
Oh yeah.
That was
well,
savage.
actually, yeah, definitely. There were a lot of good little moments. Like the part where the Dukes get it at the end is probably the most satisfying overall. So I'll probably go with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right on. Fair enough. What about you there, Brandon?
Oh, my favorite scene is the stock market scene. Of course, I guess favorite characters. Yeah, Statler and Waldorf were my favorite characters.
They're kind of racist.
Movie.
They're very racist.
It's not necessarily about whether they're characters that you like or not. It's about characters that are well performed, and they did an excellent job.
Oh yeah,
true.
Playing total dicks, rich dicks, and
classically. I mean, like, go ahead.
So, I knew a lot of people back in the day like that, and not good people.
Yeah,
that's what makes them kind of perfect sort of villains for the movie. You know what I mean? Because they are rich scumbags and they play it so well. I'm sure they're both fantastic fellows in real life when they're alive or whatever. They both got to be dead by now.
Yeah. Well, supposedly Don Amici actually was very deeply bothered by the language his character had to use. And it was difficult for him to do some of the lines. Like when he said, F him about his brother, apparently he refused to do more than one take, so they had to go with
He did it perfectly. Though.
Yeah.
Fuck him.
Exactly.
And even in that scene where they, drop the N-bomb, like he says it, and then the other dude, when he's like, I wouldn't either, like he did look kind of slightly uncomfortable even responding to the line, so I can only imagine what it was like to say. It did make their characters extra scummy because I don't think up to that point they had outright said anything like that. So it drove it home, maybe a little more than it was needed, but, artistic choices, whatever. So what about you there, Forrest? You got or did we get a favorite? Oh, we did get favorite character and favorite scene from Brandon. Forrest, take it away. You got
all right. Favorite character. Oh boy. I kind of want to say it's toss. God, toss up between Winthorpe, Billy Ray, and Ophelia. I mean, just because they were all three, Aykroyd, Murphy, and Curtis were all just really were. To me, this is, for all three of them, this is probably some of their best best roles.
for sure.
Yeah. Oh God, it's hard to pick one with this one.
They're a great trio. I mean, that plays into the whole thing I was saying too about how they probably should have moved up them all hooking up a lot, toward like the middle point of the movie because they could have done more with all three of them together. Anyway, go ahead, bud. Sorry.
And then favorite scene. Oh God! And then favorite scene, I'd probably say when Aykroyd's in jail and Frank. I would say Frank Oz's cameo. He tells him he's got it's PCP. He's got PCP.
I like how he says gold card too. Like it's like all disgusted in a way. I don't know, man. I mean, it's obviously in terms of favorite character, I'm gonna have, if I was forced to choose, it would be Coleman because he's just rad. I especially love that scene where he's like going around finishing off their drinks at the house party and he's got like a little buzz on. He sees those girls dancing topless, and then at the end he's like, he was like, I thought it was a great success, or like he was having a good old time. But and then the scene that followed was super touching between him and Eddie Murphy. So I guess that wraps it up. If I were to have to choose in terms of like the best Christmas element of the movie would be that scene, and favorite character is included in that too. If I had to give a runner up to it, I mean obviously I'm going with the gorilla.
Obviously. That gorilla had some fun.
A gorilla.
I mean, in terms of other stuff, I'm pretty sure that kind of covered. We could do music, but it didn't really stand out to me.
I thought the music was fantastic with this. Elmer Bernstein, I think, is one of the best composers for comedy for comedies.
I'll have to go back and give it another look because, admittedly, I did watch this too with like kids running around the house, so that could have affected. I mean, they weren't watching the movie. I had some headphones on and shit, but I was like distracted, so I didn't really get to sink into that element of the movie maybe as much as I probably should have. If you guys think it's a good score, I'll give it another go. Visual effects, I think, was basically just Jamie Lee Curtis.
Same here.
We did have a guy in a gorilla suit. That was
I was going to say there's like some costuming and whatever involved that was pretty effective overall. They did a good job with the production design and that sort of thing.
And warning to parents who might be showing this to their kids if it's the unedited version. There are some topless shots in this film.
Yes, because that's clearly the worst thing in the movie.
Well,
one of the things that made some of us boys into men.
Right. Brought me a little closer to that this time, man. Shit.
Well, it's worth noting, I don't think we've mentioned, but wasn't this Jamie Lee's first non-horror role?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And speaking of firsts, an individual credited as, well, not really technically credited, but listed on IMDb as Woman at Party. This was the first film role and apparently second role ever after an SNL appearance for Arlene Sorkin, who would go on to be 380 episodes on Days of Our Lives, and who also is a friend of Paul Dini. So in a sense, this was like the earliest spark of the existence of Harley Quinn. So
The original
that's
voice of Harley Quinn.
Yep. Well, she
That's
and
pretty
Denny
cool.
were friends, and he wrote the role as a walk-on for her for an animated series. Yeah. So
As far as Jamie Lee, I do want to go on record as saying, like, you know, obvious elements aside, this is probably her at her absolute cutest, I think. Like, even when she's fully clothed, she's still, there's just something cute about her because she's so
she does
young
look
and
good
short
in
hair
this.
and stuff. Yeah. Like when she pulls off the wig is one of my favorite parts because she just looks
Yeah.
cool and fun.
Not
you
so
know?
much with the wig. The wig was a little much.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of though. Yeah, if you looked like her, you'd have to do that to make yourself obviously look like a hooker, right? So it's kind of like her waitress uniform or something. Like she wears it so they can for sure tell that that's what she's doing. You know. I guess that about does it, boys. I mean, I think we covered it. It's you know, it's a fairly good movie. I think definitely all the advisories should be taken to heart. Not one to watch with the kids. I'll show my kids some crazy shit, but when it comes to like maybe some of that racially charged stuff or things like, I don't want her thinking that shit's normal. So I definitely knew to, you know, isolate the sound for this guy. It's a good movie though. It's got its feel good elements. It's definitely not one to get you by the fire, you know, expecting a feel good time. You know, it's going to make you think about life a little bit in some ways, especially as Brandon pointed out in the 2020 reality that might kind of bum you out a little bit. But I like to think the comeuppance at the end and the places our characters end up relative to where they start makes it satisfying overall.
I appreciated the entertainment value.
Oh yeah, it's solid.
I will say, I do think that having the person drop the N-bomb was fine, and the fact that it showed what kind of total terrible person that one was. I mean, I don't think you needed it, but at the same time, I can understand where it came from.
Yeah, it served its purpose.
If you present it in the fact that this guy is a total scumbag, and only scumbags would say such things, you know, that's a better way of looking at it.
Well, and to be fair, he was the worst of the old men, so it's not like they painted him as a lovable old man leading up to that scene or anything. You're not shocked that said it, but you're like shocked you heard it for a second, just like Eddie Murphy. Like you get those saucer eyes for a minute, like, whoa. They really pulled it out. I thought it was just going to be subtext.
I mean, it reminds me of, again, the Muppets version of Christmas Carol, where they're playing Marley and Marley.
I feel like
they're the Bob Marley brothers.
Well, you know, that dude was having a heart attack, so you might have been shaking some chains in the afterlife shortly after the credits rolled. Who could say?
Well, as Heckle and Jekyll said, that was great. That was short. That was sweet. I loved it.
Right.
So, why don't we start with outros? Starting with you, Mo. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
My name is Mo. I do videos for my channel, Drunken Master Studios, when inspiration strikes. Mostly I hang out with these guys and talk about all manner of movies, up to and including apparently Christmas Vacation too. So I'm going to start mentioning that. This was a good time. Definitely, if you guys want to check out more good times involving general discussions and myself, check out the upcoming episode of Super Enabler Bros podcast, where I got to plug this stuff, and we talked about all types of fun shit, made fun of Jubilee from X-Men throwing pop rocks in people's face, all types of good times. So get out there and check that out. So, you know, Sub Up Rebel Gaming Club. I haven't done a video with them in a while, but that there will be some forthcoming. So,
Alrighty. Why don't we go over to you, Forrest, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right, I'm Forrest Bennett, based in Long Island, New York. I produce various film projects, and I produce movies. I actually just had my first paid acting gig the other day in a short mockumentary, which I'm hoping to share with you guys soon. And also come on here and shoot shit about movies.
always a good time. Looking forward to checking out that mockumentary.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely looking forward to that. So going over to you, Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, of course, I'm Septum Sen of Septum Sen versus the World. We love physical media on our channel. We're kind of backing off a little bit for the holidays. Mainly just hitting new movie releases, working on pickups. But we did finish up our Halloween episodes. That's going to debut on Thursday, where we talk about Freddy versus Jason and the Friday the 13th remake. So you should check that out. It was a good discussion.
That was a good
And
time.
we'll be going back to our old school vlogcast next week. So it'll be our Christmas vlogcast because that'll be Christmas week. And of course, I do work with Inside Movies Galore and help with organizing what we're covering for the month. Of course, we finally did decide about what our topic is for next month, which is going to be awesomely outdated sci-fi. So sci-fi movies that take place in a year that's a little bit in the past, but it's still kind of futuristic. Like, say, 2001 Space Odyssey is a good example. But of course, it's still our holiday season. So next week, we're going to have some very fun films. The pre-show being, as Mo predicted, one of everyone's favorite holiday films, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation 2. And which, by the way, was chosen by our voters. And not one of us. So don't hurt us on this. And then, of course, our main film will be The Santa Claus with Tim Allen. I almost said Tim Curry. That would have been a different,
Slightly different film.
Yeah.
But we do have some wonderful individuals. Next month, we're going to be trying something different, where our main shows will be picked only by our cast, and our pre-shows will only be picked by you viewers out there. So if you want to get on the fun, you need to check out these wonderful Facebook pages if you are invited, or if you can stumble upon them, because some of them are open, some of them are more closed invitation. But we have Moe's Tavern, Talk Movies with Us, Movie Collectors, and Amazing Collectors Inc. All of these will be participating in our countdown to January, so you'll be able to vote if you're a part. Well, actually submit your interest in outdated films, and then eventually vote on it. So maybe your film might make it.
Going over to Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am Kotobuki Jake. I am also on Septum Sin versus the World. I am a movie collector, fan, what have you, here in Central Virginia that yeah, also obviously come on these channels and have a good time chatting about movies with these fine folks. I think you mentioned, I'm sorry it's late and I'm easily distracted. I'm thrilled that we have finally finished our Friday the 13th series. Yeah.
You know you loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. But at any rate, and I'm going to be looking at hopefully getting involved in more projects in the new year. I've got a big non-movie related project of coming up, but anytime I have in the meantime, I'm hoping some movie stuff will work its way in as well. Yeah.
Alrighty. And my name is David Strege. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming with us on our Christmas season journey. And I think we've had fun, and we're going to have a lot more coming up, as Brandon may have told you. So, but I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I go on about video pickups that I have, video reviews of my own thoughts that you may want to check out. Just recently, I went on about a Christmas action film called Everly with the lovely Selma Hayek. Hayek with
Haystack.
with my buddy from Croatia. So definitely check that discussion out. And have a good holiday season, everyone. So like, share, and subscribe. Happy holidays, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Make a point to try some of that Santa beard trout too.
Indeed.